studies, the methods are wrong. They're shoddy science. They don't make sense. They're based on PCR, which isn't really good for HIV, and they just don't do the right calculations. Plus, even if they did actually find millions of viruses like they claim to have found, what they're claiming to have found is not the latent viruses that have infected the cell, but free virus, which is outside the cell. Now, the old standard mainstream AIDS research says that free virus, which is outside the cell, is not infectious, because when it is outside the cell, the envelope of the virus is very fragile, and it usually will fall off. So in order for one cell to infect another with its HIV, the cells have got to butt up against each other. And if the virus is just free and it's out floating around in the bloodstream, it's probably lost its envelope. And the envelope is a crucial part of the infectivity process. Without the envelope, it can't infect because it can't bind on to the little site, the receptor site, where it's supposed to bind itself.
The general public doesn't understand the idea of a gold standard here. Neither do doctors, physicians. So, I mean, you know, you just pull the average physician away from his convention someplace in Cincinnati or something, and sit down and have dinner with him and talk to him about this kind of a situation, and see how much he really knows. Like, does he know what a Western does? Does he know what a Western blot actually does? I mean, how is it different from this ELISA test? Does he understand how an ELISA test is operated? Does he understand anything about the statistics associated with the times when they've been tried? No, he doesn't. And he doesn't give a damn either. What he knows about is that when he has a patient, he charges them a certain amount of money for every treatment that he does, for every little prescription that he writes, and he likes to have a lot of patients. And the county health department also knows that due to the Ryan White Act, for every single person who is diagnosed as having AIDS in the county, $2,500 a year from the federal government. So the county health department is actually pressuring doctors by their little subtle ways. They're not coming over and beating them, but don't miss an AIDS case. You report it to us. If it's a positive test on the HIV, you report it to us because it's $2,500 in our pocket every year.
I'm suggesting specifically, Professor Stewart, is that if JAMA, Nature, the British Medical Journal, the Lancet, New England Journal of Medicine, the 5 major medical publications in the world, will not allow dissident views on the cause or treatment of AIDS or any information around it, how then are you going to encourage a dialogue that could challenge the orthodox?
Good question. You've mentioned the big 5. You've mentioned Science, Nature, the New England Journal, the Lancet, and the British Medical Journal. Now, with the possible exception of the Lancet, all of these have refused to publish views which doubt the existing hypothesis about AIDS. And the 2 main aspects of the hypothesis are that AIDS is caused exclusively and finally by HIV, and secondly, that this is universally infectious and will cause a pandemic by heterosexual transmission in the general population. Those are the 2 prime tenets of the existing hypothesis, which is held by the consensus. Now, the Lancet has published some stuff, mainly by me, in the form of letters, which cast doubt on those 2 essential pillars of the hypothesis. They haven't published much else, and the other journals have published nothing at all. They've been asked to do so again and again by myself and others, but they will not publish.
Reporters came, asked these questions, and found them, my views or my hypotheses, very logical and convincing. But they never aired them because they were censored at the highest level, presumably when an executive producer would have called the National Institute of Health, is it all right to show this view, advanced by Duisberg from Berkeley, that AIDS is not infectious. And he probably was told from the by the National Institute of Health, this is impossible, you can't show that because people will stop practicing safe sex or will stop taking their ACT. That will endanger our anti-AIDS prevention programs and treatment programs. So that would be a disaster. Don't show this back, and that's what they do. They follow orders like everybody else.
How much censorship has there been in the gay press concerning looking at all issues and all arguments from all sides, fairly and objectively?
The censorship in the gay press is a tragedy, a disgrace. It's been almost complete. There are people in this city who work quite hard to try and create the space in which a proper discussion can be had.
As I continued to work the issue as a journalist, I gradually became more and more skeptical. At the same time, I was also involved in AIDS activism and could see how the organizations changed over the years. I've been involved in Being Alive San Diego. I've been involved in ACT UP San Diego, and now I'm a co-founder of HEAL. It always seemed to me that this would be an issue that activists who are concerned about finding a solution to AIDS would grab onto. They would be interested as I attempted to share my growing doubts about the HIV/AIDS model. And instead, I saw people clinging to HIV with an almost religious fervor.
The consensus controls the thinking, the funds, the grants, the publicity, and the policy.
The media has just gone along with the government party line, and it's partly their fault and it's partly the government's, because I know that any journalist who dares speak against what the government says is cut off, and the government won't give them the story or the information they need to write. So I blame both the government and the media.
Do you feel scientists have also allowed themselves to be co-opted because if they challenged, they wouldn't get any funding?
Yes, scientists who speak up against the HIV theory are cut off almost immediately. This happened to Peter Duesberg. He has no funding when he used to be able to get any grant he wanted. And one kind of hears to the back door of various scientists who agree with him, and they come to him in private and say, "Don't say my name, but I agree with you, and I can never say that because I know I'll lose my grant if I do."
My funding, for example, from the National Institute of Health will not be renewed as of this year, and I may be out of business then. Also, my colleagues have essentially excommunicated me. I'm not invited to meetings, or hardly ever to meetings anymore, not ever to one on AIDS. I'm not allowed to publish in the same journals anymore as I used to. Even as a member of the National Academy, I cannot publish in the National Academy my views that drugs may be the cause of AIDS. And I have plenty of evidence to support it, to document my claim, which might be very relevant to the health of millions of Americans and people on this planet. Yet I'm censored because I'm essentially considered to be an outcast or an odd man or somebody who has controversial views.
Anyone who tries to venture into this field of trying to report fairly and accurately all sides of the story will immediately be pushed out onto the margins and told that they're being irresponsible and that they are trying to support people whose views are just not credible and they're nutters. And so the journalists themselves will then become treated as nutters and as rogues. And so they begin to lose their credibility. And so it's a very brave journalist who puts forward any of these views, because immediately he's in danger of having his whole journalistic career discredited.
That the current generation have too much to lose of orthodoxy, of journalists. They've invested their lives in trying to be helpful to the AIDS debate. They think that their journalism is helping. In actual fact, it's based on a false premise. Now, they're not going to backtrack, neither the journalists nor the scientists. Nobody's going to backtrack. There's too much to lose.
There has definitely been a form of self-imposed censorship by the major